Hello everyone, I'm Sir Guy Man. Welcome back to Civilization Reborn. This is episode 2. If you haven't seen episode 1, I highly recommend that you go do that now. So if you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and stick around till the end. That will help me in the algorithm. On with the video. If you had seen last episode, episode 1, you would know that the cities and capitals are new. And the reason why they are new is because I decided, hey, would it be cool if they had cities and capitals, and that's why they are there. And you may notice that not every country has a capital, and that's because some of them are too small, and having one of these big capitals would take up their entire country. So I decided that, hey, whatever, they don't need a capital. So anyways, you may remember in the last video that Chicago hasn't always been this big. In fact, it was actually kind of small, and kind of only took up like the kind of like the Chicago area. But they did some invading, and because of that invading of their neighbors, they brought a lot of destruction, and that made a bunch of the inhabitants flee the area. They didn't want to live here anymore because of all this destruction. So what they did do is they first went south into here, and they didn't really want to live here. They kind of wanted their own, you know, country. So they continued down the Illinois River, and eventually they just kept going and going, going down the Illinois until eventually they reached this little junction here with the Mississippi, Illinois, and Missouri River. So they're like, "Oh wow, this is quite a cool place. We'll start to settle around here," and they do that. And over here, a bunch of the inhabitants also flee west. They go down this little river over here. They meet up with the Mississippi, and then they eventually go downwards, down along the Mississippi, and they meet up with these guys, and they're like, "Oh wow, how cool! We more people." So they're like, "Oh wow, let's explore down these rivers a bit." They explore up the Missouri, and they're like, "Oh wow, river and farmland, I guess." And then they also go further down the Mississippi a little, and they're like, "Oh cool, a junction." And this junction is with the Ohio River. And they're like, "Oh wow, an Ohio River, how cool." They also begin to explore inland Illinois, and they're like, "Oh wow, how cool! Bunch of farmland. This is amazing. We can farm here." Then going up to Wisconsin, you may also remember that the Green Bay people also invaded their neighbors, and a bunch of these guys also fled west, where they met up with the Mississippi, and then crossed the Mississippi, and they're like, "Oh wow, Iowa." And then they also fled northward a little into Wisconsin and also Minnesota, and they're like, "Oh wow, how cool. More rivers and farmland." So in the St. Louis area, we see a new ethnicity pop up. It's heavily inspired by the Chicagoan ethnicity, but it's not exactly the same. But yeah, we see them expand around the southern Illinois slash eastern Missouri area, and eventually we see a bunch of countries pop up in the St. Louis slash southern Illinois area. And you may be wondering, why exactly are there so many countries if there were just like two or three countries that were invaded from Chicago? And I say, well, it's not just refugees; it's also a bunch of people who are also coming out in search of of a new life. So yeah, they basically start up a bunch of new countries over here, and you can probably see they also have a bunch of cities. And now we go northwards towards Wisconsin slash Minnesota, where a new ethnicity pops up. And now we see a new ethnicity over here in Duluth. It reaches around the shores of Lake Superior. It also extends down here into these lakes and rivers down here in Wisconsin slash once again Minnesota. So yeah, a new ethnic a new ethnicity starts over here, and with new ethnicities, there are new countries. So these are just a few of the countries that pop up in the Duluth, Wisconsin area. As you can see, they have new cities and quite funky borders. And now that people are living here, they are kind of interested in the surrounding area. So they begin to explore their surrounding area, and they discover a bunch of lakes and rivers, and they're like, wow, there's so many lakes. However, this ground is a little too rocky. And the reason why this ground is rocky is because of this thing called the Canadian Shield. Now you may be asking, hey, what's the Canadian Shield? And that is a good question to ask. The Canadian Shield is a large area in Canada and in parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin that has a very thin layer of dirt, and under that thin layer of dirt is a whole bunch of bedrock, if not just the bedrock being out and exposed. So what this means is that this area has very poor farming area. It's not a good place to farm. You don't really want to be here if you're a farmer, which is really unfortunate for our current civilization dudes, as farming is basically their entire livelihood. They don't really do anything other than farm. I mean, I guess they create stuff like crafts and artisanal goods, but that's kind of all. And if an area doesn't have good farmland, then they can't really live there. And we also go over here as these guys in Michigan send a few scouts out to observe the surrounding area of Lake Huron. And they're like, wow, this area is also not very good for farming because this is in the Canadian Shield. And so they also explore up and around this area. They find a bunch of lakes. They're like, wow, there's so many lakes. If only we could farm around them. They also send their scouts eastwards around Lake Ontario, and they're like, wow, a lake. That's cool. There's quite a lot of lakes in this region. They're kind of great. They then send scouts out and around Lake Ontario, and they're like, wow, more lakes. And they're like, wow, so many lakes. There's so many lakes here. I wonder why there's so many lakes. And what they don't know is that a few thousand years ago, there used to be a bunch of glaciers, and the glaciers receded, and what's left, and then what they left behind was a bunch of glacial melt, which filled in this area of the Great Lakes. That is today's geography lesson. Down here in Detroit, we see these Michiganders coming over and like, wow, this is a good area to live. So let's settle it. And settle it they do. They bring their ethnicity down here into Detroit and southern Ontario. And they're like, wow, this is cool. This is so cool. What a beautiful place to live. They also begin to move southward into Michigan, southern Michigan. And they're like, wow, how cool. They also bump into these Chicagoan guys. And they're like, huh, people, how cool, though you are different from us, and we don't entirely like that. Anyways, they also begin to settle around the shores of Lake Erie. They're like, wow, this is so cool. And with this newfound interest eastwards, we see Saginaw Bay expand their borders eastwards around the coast of Lake Huron, and wow, they claim it. Here we see these new countries popping up. We have one here in Detroit, one here in Sandusky, a couple over here in southern Ontario, and then a few just south of Saginaw Bay. That's going to be enough of our new countries era. We are now going to be going into the expansion era. And we're going to first focus over here on Chicago. Chicago is once again hungry for land. They want people, they want power. They want to exercise their force on the surrounding area. They recognize that soon, with all these new countries around, they may not be the strongest country anymore. So, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to invade their orange neighbors to the south. And it's going to go pretty easy. They are quite strong. The Chicagoans, not the orange neighbors. And eventually, their main city is captured and they fall, and it is complete annexation by Chicago. They also then move into this brown country over here on the shores of Lake Michigan, and they completely take them out. They also move into this purple people down here and completely take them out and completely annex them over here. Now they don't keep going because they realize that if they overextend, rebellions might pop up in these new countries that they've taken over. So they are going to start like assimilating them and making these regions stable. They are also going to expand their borders, and this time not through violent means. They are going to start sending out settlers to claim these new lands in the name of Chicago, and eventually, when they are done, they end up claiming enough land to basically double their size and establish their power over everyone in the Midwest area. Now, these Green Bayers up here, they aren't too happy with this newfound Chicago threat. They recognize that if they don't do anything soon, that they might be next in Chicago's grand conquest. So, what is Green Bay going to do? Well, they're going to once again invade their neighbors. So, who is Green Bay going to invade? Well, they are going to invade these two people up here. They first invade these purplish guys up here, and they invade these guys first to make sure these orange guys over here do not invade. Yeah, and the invasion is pretty successful, and they immediately launch an invasion of these guys over here. And, well, yeah, it's quite easy. They weren't too strong to begin with. We also see these guys send out settlers into these lands over here. We also see the Green Bayers send out settlers to go claim land. and claim land they do. They claim basically these portions of Wisconsin. They can't really claim the other side of this river, so they're kind of stuck here. But they also meet with the Chicagoans. They finally touch borders, and the Chicagoans are like, "Huh, we better take this land pretty fast." But before they can do that, these little guys down here, they claim the what's left over here, and they do that because they are protected by the Green Bayers. And if the Chicagoans invade the Sheboygans, the Green Bayers will declare war on Chicago. So Chicago doesn't really want that right now, so they're going to leave them alone. But Green Bay is not the only country to be expanding. These orange guys up here, they also kind of want to expand. They want to exert their power. And to do that, but Green Bay is not the only people who want to expand. These orange guys, they also want to expand. They want to have some sort of power over the Lake Michigan area. So they begin to invade their neighbors. The first up on this chopping block are these green guys down here. Their forces move in and instantly capture this city, and then the rest of the country falls over. And with the end of this war, it's complete annexation. And with this annexation of these guys down here, they focus up here and begin to invade these purple guys. And the invasion goes pretty smoothly. They capture their capital, and bam, the entire country falls over pretty quick. They then invade these purple guys over here, knock them out, and then they invade these guys over here, and wow, they're out too. And what they're going to do is completely take over all of these guys over here. And now that they have invaded their neighbors, they're not going to really invade anyone else because they are going to start rebuilding these areas over here. Because if they don't, well, then they'll just rebel and then they will lose all of their ground. And the last thing of this video, these North Michiganders are going to set up an empire of their own. They also want to become powerful and rich. So the first target up on their chopping block are these blue guys down here. They send their forces into this country, and these guys are pretty weak, and so they fall kind of instantly, and well, they just completely take them over. Next, they invade these pink guys over here, and once again, pretty easy. They walk through it. And then they also invade these brown guys over here, and they invade them because they want to. And you might expect these guys to invade the blue guys, but they're quite friendly with them, and they don't want to invade them. They serve as a good uh, force against these guys, so they keep them alive. And that is going to do it with the wars for today. And to wrap things up, we have the coronation of the North Michigan King. Yeah, these North Michiganders are now officially a kingdom. We also see these guys over here coronate a king, and wow, isn't that special? There's now a bunch of new kingdoms over here in the Midwest. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Civilization Reborn. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I am going to aim for 500 subscribers because I think that'd be cool. So, if you did like this, once again, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.